Hi there, my name's Conor. I'm a student here at UCL and I'm also part of the Impartial Chairs programme, which is an initiative designed to help facilitate challenging discussions and debates on campus. Today, during this panel discussion between UCL and the Students Union, I'll be putting your questions to my two fantastic guests. I'm joined by Professor Kathleen Armour, Vice-Provost for Education and Student Experience. Welcome, Kathleen. And I'm also joined by Ahmad Ismail, the Equity and Inclusion Sabbatical Officer at the Students Union. Welcome, Ahmad. Thank you for joining me both today. We've got a lot to talk about. Just before we jump into the questions, Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself and what you do at UCL?
Yeah, sure. So my job title is Vice-Provost Education and Student Experience, and my main role is to oversee all of the academic education for our undergraduate and postgraduate taught students. Obviously, that connects with things like student registry services, well-being, estates, and all of that. But a lot of the work we do is around academic excellence, academic policy, and trying to fix the things that can work for students and staff in that space.
Wonderful, and I think we've got some questions relevant to that coming up later on, so that's perfect. And Ahmed, what about you? What do you do at the Student Union?
I'm the Equity and Inclusion Sabbatical Officer, so I'm one of the 6 elected sabbatical officers where we work full-time to represent students. In my role, everything to do with equity and inclusion, especially with student life strategy, which we will be talking about later, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. It's high on the agenda. We've been taking submissions from students via email and social media, and they fit into a few nice distinct topic areas. So we'll be discussing everything from freedom of speech to the cost of living crisis. So let's jump straight in. So obviously when this is coming out, it's LGBTQ History Month. And of course, I think it goes without saying that it's important that all students feel safe, comfortable and able to express their identity on campus. UCL recently established the Equality Implementation Group to sort of drive this forward. And this has involved creating an LGBTQ action plan. Ahmed, could you explain what this action plan is and also how students can get involved?
Yes. So both my predecessor, Shay, and I worked on the implementation group, writing up the action plan, which looks at how to best support both students and staff moving forward since the withdrawal of Stonewall, which was mostly, I would say, staff focused more on employment, and we do know how our students feel about that. So what we did is to try work with UCL to champion the student voice through that, through different ways, such as pronoun integration within classes, unifying systems to make it easier for people to declare their pronouns. Aside from that, it shows the commitment UCL is putting towards LGBTQ members of the community, both within the institution and what the SU is doing. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Kathy, obviously this is a joint initiative between the Students Union and UCL. Do you have anything to add?
My experience of UCL so far has been particularly good. For example, when a student wants to transition, I've found that has, and perhaps wants to express completely differently. I think I've found that the experiences that I've heard about and have been reported to me, they've been pretty positive. So that's what you would hope. You would hope, UCL is part of a wider society. And, I place all my faith in education. And if we get education right, people will just generally be supportive of each other. But sometimes, we are part of wider society and things happen on campus that you really wish didn't. And they happen outside as well. But I think the key thing is, what do we do about it? And I feel that we've got a lot of actions in place.
Absolutely. And I know that we hear from quite a few LGBTQ students, especially trans and non-binary students, about negative experiences at UCL. What more can we do to address these concerns?
So students should always report. The systems are there. And if there is something, any student that experiences any kind of discrimination or any unpleasant behaviour should always seek support but report as well, because if we don't know something is happening, we can't deal with it. We have 24-hour helplines. You can get support for health and well-being. You can get support for just feeling that you've got a particular problem at a moment in time. And students should use those systems. That's what they're there for. That's why they're 24-hour. That's so we try not to miss anything. And that gives us the information, the data, and we can see whether we're making progress or not.
I want to go back to your point on education. I think lots of it is preventative and educating the community around the different experiences. Many people that aren't part of the LGBT community might not know, might not necessarily have experience with what it's like to be queer or a gender diverse person on campus. And other than the support we provide, such as our Gender Expression Fund, which helps students in financial hardship be able to better express their identity. Lots of the work we do within the SU, the societies we have, does promote this education on the experiences. Like Drama Society has Pride coming up, Pride Showcase, and lots of different societies do lots of different things to educate around just the experience of, the daily experience of being an LGBTQ student in London in this day.
We've got LGBT History Month. Yep. Are there any events in particular, Ahmed, that you're looking forward to?
I did mention Pride. Glitterous, definitely. We're going to be having an LGBTQ ball in Mullies. There's a lot going on.
Is there a site? Must be a website students can go to see everything?
Yes, we have an LGBTQ History Month landing page with everything that's happening across Arts UCL, Team UCL, and all the other societies.
Brilliant. And it will be on the What's On calendar as well on the Students Union website, I'm sure. Perfect. What is UCL doing more generally to make decision-making more transparent so that students are able to have an input?
So my job, basically, is to make sure that the student voice is front and centre in everything to do with education, in particular, in my role. And I think since I've been here, we've done so much work with the SU on this. It's been fantastic, actually. And I actually have a deputy whose one of their main goals is to make that connection with the day-to-day connection with the SU so that we are working together. I think one of the things I've picked up since I've been here is that the SU at UCL has far more responsibility, far more engagement than most other places. It's a different organisation to most other universities. And I think the way the SU wants to work in partnership is just such a fantastic way forward, because we are so strong together and we're achieving a lot of things. We're hoping we're going to get a new building, aren't we? We're doing a lot of work towards a new student union building, which is long overdue. We've got the new student life strategy, but we've done these things together because it shouldn't really be about students inputting to stuff. It should be about constructing things together. And that's when things work really well. This is not to say, we have data from the NSS, for example, where students tell us things. Well, we don't have to keep going back to students to get the same information. Actually, what we need to do then sometimes is act on what students are telling us. But generally, we make sure that students are in all the committees, that they are part of everything that's going on, and that we work with students to develop our ideas wherever possible. But we're just doing some new work around feedback and assessment. Well, students have told us about assessment and feedback forever. So my job now is to do something about it, and then come back to the students and say, is this what you're talking about? So it's from the beginning rather than, we have that relationship from the beginning rather than feeding into what's already happening. And then we have the other university committees, and again, students don't need to sit on absolutely everything, and we don't need to sit on all of their committees, but students should always be involved, for example, in our University Management Committee when there are things that are absolutely affecting students, and they are. And Mary was there yesterday.
Yeah, and that's wonderful, and I think that's a very positive take, and the idea of it's a partnership really between UCL and the SU. At the same time, the SU is also a democratic body of students. And so, Ahmed, I have to ask you, of course, what is the Student Union doing to sort of hold UCL accountable to ensure that, you know, things are transparent and that, you know, on the SU side you are involved in the discussions representing students?
Like Kathy mentioned, as SABs and by extension the student officers and many of the faculty, department and academic reps sit on a bunch of committees. I sit on education committee with Kathy, which governs mainly many of the educational stuff that happens. And we also sit on a wide range of committees across the institution to see what the university is doing, see how the university is acting on what the students want, what the students are saying, and to be able to update our students. We also have our own democratic bodies within the SU, like the zones, and we're working closely with UCL on that. Just yesterday we had the education zone where members of Kathy's team were there talking about everything from how the academic year is structured to how we want assessments to be, to term 3, which is a big topic right now. And all of this is under the Program Excellence Project, which we're very excited about, and to involve students in at all levels. And there's also ongoing work around ECs right now. So there's lots happening within that arena.
Fantastic. And yeah, I think, you know, one thing that's come up a couple of times already is this idea of assessments. And obviously, Kathy, you were talking about, you know, you've had years of feedback from students about assessments. And I think, speaking from my own student experience and my friends' student experience, there is often this feeling that term 3 is a bit pointless. You know, when you have courseworks that are due in sort of on the very first day of term 3, you do wonder what the rest of those weeks are for. So Kathy, I don't know if you want to enlighten us on what UCL's thoughts on that are and what plans you have in place.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was an issue recognised in our strategy, and so we committed to looking at term 3. I think this has come up. I think we'd have to acknowledge that students have very variable experiences across term 3. So for some students, it's very busy. They won't know what we're talking about. They'll be on a placement, they'll be in field work, they'll be doing internships, they'll be doing all sorts of things, and they just won't, you know, they won't recognise this. But for other students, because we've had a change in the way we assess over time, instead of students having 12 exams, for example, in the summer term, there are some that still have that, but most don't, then there's a lot of coursework as well. So you could end up with students who have rather less in term 3 than they would have done in the past. So in order to recognise that, we've just done an audit across, looking particularly at UG students. Obviously PGT students should be on their dissertation over the summer. But for undergraduate students, we've just done an audit. And we want to make sure that there are equivalent opportunities for all students. And we've called it an Extended Learning Opportunities Project to try and capture what's already available, how more students can access it, and what other things we can put on to make sure that, you know, there are equivalent opportunities. And for some students, you know, they will be so busy already, they won't want to take up these opportunities, but I think we need to make sure there's more available. And that's, the project is well underway, and we'll be piloting some things this year, and then it will just grow over time.
Perfect. And I know some universities, say for example Sheffield, have sort of exam periods after the Christmas holidays as well.
Yes.
Is that something that is being considered?
Yes, well, I'm honestly not a fan of the structure where you get taught in the autumn term and then you postpone your exam until the summer. Now, some places do that and they have an argument for it. On the whole, but we also know that in a lot of parts of UCL, they're putting exams or assessments into that period after term 1, but there's no formal place or structure or support for them to do it. So yes, that's part of the shape of the academic year work, to look at making sure we provide an opportunity for those departments that want to have a formal assessment period there. Now, it's complex because you have to juggle the shape of those terms. But we think it's possible to do it, and we're working on that too. So it's all in that education strategy. It's what we've set out to do. We've got milestones, and we have to deliver. Fantastic, by 27.
Absolutely. And Ahmed, you mentioned before about, ECs as well, and you've been sort of hearing from students in sort of various different capacities. Do you have anything to share in that respect?
Yes, currently there's work underway with mainly through our education officer around changing the way we do ECs, especially around the self-certified ones, because most of the time they do go through, and it just creates an administrative burden and nightmare, I would say, on the staff that are doing it instead of doing the things that matter. So what we're trying to do in collaboration with the faculties and departments is move to a free pass system, if you may, where instead of having to go through the whole process of the self-certified ECs, is being able to say we have 2 a year. And yeah, you just know when you use them. And I think it makes it both easier for the students, knowing that they have this some sort of lifeline if they need it, and for the staff not having to do the administrative work for it.
And I think sort of, especially the interim, while we're sort of figuring out how we can make the exam system better, I think ECs are a really important part of that lifeline, aren't they? So definitely thinking about how we use them is very important. Just sort of jumping on in the conversation now, I think one thing that's definitely at the forefront of most students' minds is the cost of living crisis. So I think, most, if not all, students are feeling increased financial pressures to the point where actually for some students attending UCL is unsustainable. And this isn't a short-term problem, it doesn't look like a short-term problem. So Kathy, what's your view on affordability of higher education, and is UCL doing everything that it can to sort of keep the cost of education to a minimum?
Yeah, it's a huge problem for our sector at the moment. For some reason, and I really can't give a good reason why it is that students have been pretty much forgotten as inflation has led to this cost of living crisis. Maintenance loans haven't kept up. Of course, from the university side, tuition fees have stayed pretty flat, but since 2012 actually, with one small uplift in that time. Inflation has risen, costs have risen, and also students are paying they're paying very high tuition fees with the interest rate on the loan, which is a pretty big debt. And it feels like that. So the students want more from the university, and that's absolutely fair. It would be jolly good if we were funded to do more as well. That would be really great. And then we would like to, we do have a hardship fund. A lot of students don't realise that they can access hardship funds. They really can. It's there, use it. And we've put more money into hardship funds to make sure that we can catch the students in the very worst positions. But I'm not going to deny it is a problem. It's a real challenge for everybody in the sector at the moment. And we've only got to hope that things will change fairly soon. We're lobbying hard. That's what we do. We lobby all the time as a sector. But as you know, universities tend to get a bit of a bashing these days rather than, in some senses, an understanding that universities and students, it's one of the best things we do in Britain. So you'd have thought maybe we'd have supported it.
Absolutely. And I think most importantly for those people who have applied, for example, for the hardship fund, do you think that money is getting out fast enough? Is it sufficient for them?
What do you think, Ahmad?
I think there's definitely more to improve on because the cost of living crisis is affecting students in all different ways. We try to cater to all those different ways. So like, for example, through the Sarah Douglas Hardship Fund, that can help, for example, fund someone's transport, someone's accommodation. We know that accommodation has been increasing a lot, and the 2.5% maintenance loan increase just does not cover it. And students are having to work more and work longer hours, which we've seen in the cost of living report that we did just last year. So with that, like for example, at the SU we have the participation fund so that we don't take away from one of the core parts of the student experience, which is being able to access student societies, access networking opportunities, and be able to do that stuff outside of the academic. But like Kathy mentioned, the cost of living crisis is really all-encompassing and affects students in many different ways that we might not recognize. For some people, it's making it even close to impossible to even attend UCL in the first place. So yeah.
Absolutely. And where do people go to access these funds? What's the first port of call? Do I, type something into Google, or what do I do?
So I would say for the bigger hardship funds, the first place I would say students should go to is the UCL Financial Assistance Fund, which is run centrally through UCL. And then, like I mentioned, we have the Sarah Douglas Fund, and then Participation Fund, the Gender Expression Fund. On the SU, through the advice service, we offer lots of funds as well as advice, and we have 2 qualified debt advisors which can help students with budgeting, especially in this hard time with rising costs. And just so students know they're not alone, even with something like budgeting. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that sort of, feeling not alone is really important. And sort of knowing that this is something that we're all going through together, both
and
as students and UCL as an institution as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to sort of move away a little bit from cost of living now, and actually talk about freedom of speech. So freedom of speech, challenging debates are sort of, I guess, historically central to the university experience in many ways. I think it's important that we sort of maintain that UCL as a university is a place where students can share challenging ideas, discuss and debate challenging topics, and to do that in a safe environment. I know at UCL we've got sort of the concept of disagreeing well as sort of an example of sort of how we maintain this sort of open environment. Kathy, could you just explain to us a bit more about what disagreeing well is and what UCL is doing to sort of foster those kind of conversations?
Yeah, so you can look if you just Google disagreeing well at UCL, there's a lot of material there, and you can see the kind of debates that have been had. They're open, you can engage with them, there'll be more events coming up, and anybody can engage with them. We're about, we now have a new free speech law, and the Students Union in particular. There's a big focus on the Students Union on all students' unions. And we have, as universities, it makes it absolutely clear that we have a dual responsibility to ensure freedom of speech, to uphold the law, and sometimes there's a little bit of conflict there because people might not agree with what the law says, but nonetheless, that's our job. So disagreeing well is about providing a place and the skills to be able to debate issues where you feel completely passionately that the other person is wrong, fundamentally, completely wrong. And this is a life skill because you're going to come up against this no matter where you are. We're still debating these things now all the way through our lives. So I think disagreeing well has a good kind of brand in the sector, nationally and internationally, as a way of describing that we don't agree, but we have to find a way to engage. And if we don't engage, I mean, that's what diplomacy is all about, isn't it? If we don't find a way to engage, then we're just in conflict, which gets us pretty much nowhere, actually. And it is disappointing for people when they have a very strongly held view, and somebody else has another view that is lawful. And if it's a lawful view, it can be held and expressed. And a campus has to contain all of that. And it's obviously not easy, but we have to learn to do it.
Absolutely, and you mentioned the new freedom of speech laws that have sort of come into force. I think they have particularly big ramifications for the Students' Union. Ahmad, do you want to enlighten us on sort of what these laws might mean for the SU and sort of what the SU as well is doing on their side to foster sort of freedom of expression and free speech on campus?
Definitely. So similar to universities, now this new freedom of speech legislation enshrines freedom of speech and places a duty on Students' Union to ensure that all freedom of speech can happen and can take place on campus. like you, I'm an impartial chair, and that's the direction we've taken as an SU to enable that, because we know sometimes these conversations of disagreement and contention can be multi-layered, nuanced, and complex, and we want to ensure that these discussions and debates can happen in a safe environment. So through the Impartial Chairs program, where we got to learn about the Troubles, went to Northern Ireland and see how their current community faces it on a day-to-day basis, but still are able to live with one another in relative peace, and what we can learn from that and how we can adapt that. The direction we're going in is finding and establishing community guidelines that impartial chairs like you will be able to use to make sure that these debates, especially when touching on issues of identity or marginalized communities, can really happen in a safe and informed manner, and that all panelists and audience members are aware of that and are aware of all the different nuances and their interplay.
Absolutely, and obviously we talked about sort of the idea of sort of protecting and everyone's views, and occasionally there will be views that are lawful but people perhaps feel uncomfortable about. Do you think it's possible that freedom of speech, freedom of expression can go too far on campus? And what do we do when it becomes harmful or hurtful?
Well, this is where we're going to have case law around all of this. This is all quite new. So the Office for Students is the regulator for higher education, and they now have a free speech czar, has been appointed. And one of the tasks of that free speech czar will be to start to develop some sort of case law around how we negotiate some of these difficult spaces. And they are difficult spaces. The ultimate, perhaps the only hard barrier we can see in all of this is what's lawful. Lawful but unpleasant is still lawful. And somebody finding it unpleasant, it's still lawful. And of course, there's almost every view under the sun somebody will find unpleasant. So that's where we have to come to the point of engagement, and so we don't have to agree, which is where I think the term disagreeing well works, because we still disagree, but what are we going to do? You know, fight? You know, we have to find ways forward, and I think that's where that program that you've been doing in the Impartial Chairs and in Northern Ireland has been so interesting, because that has, you know, such power to learn from those communities.
Absolutely, and I think probably a really good example of sort of something that, you know, we can perhaps disagree well on campus is where students are affected by sort of what's happening in Israel, Gaza. And obviously many in our community, we're such an international university, directly and indirectly affected by sort of the ongoing violence in Israel and Gaza. So Ahmed, what is the Student Union doing sort of actively to support students affected by what's going on at the moment?
So we have different support for student groups and individual students through our advice service and through signposting to all the different support services at the university, but also for our student groups to be able to do and continue holding their events, holding their external speakers, having fundraisers, and especially at a time like this, feeling like they belong to the wider community and that the wider community is enabling them to be who they are on campus and to express their identity and what they think, and especially under some disagreements, some contentions, just making sure that these do happen and do happen safely.
Yeah, and Kathy, it's probably fair that you sort of, you know, share your thoughts on this as well.
Sure, oh, yes. Yes, so there have been a lot of calls for the university to take a stand, to be on one side or the other, to identify what's right and what's wrong, and where it as an institution stands. Well, UCL can't stand anywhere. We're a community of people that believe both things and many more shades of those things at the same time. Our job is to make, exactly as you expressed it, our job is to have a community where people feel safe. Nobody should feel unsafe, and where expression of view and working towards some kind of understanding is what our job is as a university. And we have to maintain that, because as soon as we say, well, here's our side, we've picked a side, what happens to the other part of the community that isn't on that side? And, you know, it comes back to that whole disagreeing well point. It's difficult when you feel very, very emotionally, personally, passionately about something, and there's somebody else opposite you that you know, doesn't share that. But that's our job. You know, we're not the United Nations. We are actually a university. But we have to make sure everybody feels they can express their views on campus, and that's what we do. And I think we've generally done that reasonably well. I think the Students' Union has managed that. You know, it's been a really difficult situation. It's been a really difficult situation for us. You could say we ended up disappointing everybody a bit, but hopefully we also, you know, also it worked for as many people as possible, and that's probably as well as we can do.
Absolutely. I think when you feel that disappointment, it's hard.
Yeah.
But I think it's nice to hear from you as well that, you know, there are reasons that UCL, the Students' Union, don't take a stance, and sort of the idea of, you know, trying to maintain an objective line is probably quite reassuring for a lot of students.
Just protecting everybody.
Yeah.
You know, every member of our community has a right to the same level of protection for their views within the law.
And that's not to say everything is utopian and amazing.
No.
We do know that our students in both communities are feeling rising anti-Palestinian prejudice, rising anti-Semitism, and we do know the impacts that can have on students and on how they feel like just coming on campus. We do know some Jewish students have felt unsafe coming in with their kippas. Some Palestinian students feel unsafe wearing their kufiyyas. But what we're trying to do is to make sure that we do offer a support system for these students, and we remain open and inclusive to all of these students and make sure that they feel welcome and accepted coming in on campus, because ultimately that's the most important thing, and making sure that the welfare of our students is a priority.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I come back, there is that 24-hour helpline. If things are going wrong, people should, I mean, you know, aside of everything else, that's a way that at any time a student can get some support, and should always use that. You know, that's why the services are there.
Perfect. Shifting gears a little bit now, but again on a topic that students do feel incredibly passionate about, and that's sort of been reflected in the sheer volume of questions we've had, and that is about climate and sustainability. And I think, you know, as young people, the climate crisis is on a lot of our minds, and a lot of people would like to know sort of how is sort of UCL acting as a leader in this space, and how can education at UCL inspire the next generation to sort of come up with strategies to combat climate change?
So when you do a review of all our modules, we did, or groups have done, a review of all the modules. I think there's about 1,000 modules that we have that have some element of climate work in them. UCL's research in this area is second to none. You know, we're globally known for the research that we do, and that of course feeds into the teaching in so many ways, across so many disciplines. And that's really important, because it means, you know, these things are being caught as part of the curriculum, and you know, shouldn't always be an add-on. It should be caught as part of the curriculum. But in addition to that, one of the extended learning opportunities projects we're doing is looking at what more we can do so that students can work in groups together in perhaps term 3, but you know, they'll do it throughout the year as well, in order to get some new thinking in the space, because the climate crisis is one of our new global challenges. It's one of our key areas, research areas, that we're going to be focusing on through the period of the strategy. So there will be many, many more opportunities to get involved. And whereas previously some of the research themes have been largely about research, these grand challenges are about, global challenges are about research and education. So we're just about to appoint a new lead for this area, for this challenge. And one of the tasks is to look at how we can weave through education as much of this work as possible. There is an education sustainability group, and they're also providing materials for staff. So there's a lot going on. Estate, the Pearl building is net zero. It's the first building we've done. So there's a lot happening, and it needs to really thread through everything. And I think it's pretty difficult to deny that the planet is warming. I mean, I know people do, and that's a very lawful view. It is, however, difficult to deny, I think. And increasingly, it will become easier for us to do more work in this space. As it becomes more obvious, it will be frustrating for the people that have been predicting this for a really long time, but it will help to bring people along, I think.
And I think what you said about threading education of it through everything is really crucial here. I mean, UCL students are very passionate, very invested in making an impact, and so we have a duty to help enable them to do that, whether that's through the goals we set as an institution, for our net zero goals, for the work we do locally to get closer and closer to those goals, or whether that's through the forums we have access to, like our SU President Mary recently went to COP, and although that's not solving everything, it helps establish those networks. And one thing that's really important to bear in mind is we are London's global university, which means many of us do have somewhere else, and taking that knowledge, that networking, that experience on this, and the top-notch research, I would say, and being able to make not just an impact here, but everywhere else and everywhere we do end up, I think that's the really important point, and I think that's what we should aim for, essentially, is that longer term, as well as being able to focus on the local things we can do within the institution.
I think, we've talked a lot about sort of UCL as sort of leading research, leading education, which is fantastic. That's what we're here for at the end of the day. But perhaps we could draw on some of those local things as well. I mean, the Student Union, for example, part of what the SU does is run cafes and bars. So I don't know if you can give us some sort of practical examples, Ahmed, of what the SU is doing to be more environmentally friendly, more sustainable. Yeah,
so I think across all our cafes now, disposable cups, there's an extra charge on them. So that's to basically encourage students to bring their own cups. We also have crockery in many of the cafes, so that students who do want to eat in do not have to use single-use or disposable materials. Oat milk has become a default. In terms of procurement and everything for the events we run, we make sure everything we do is ethically sourced at the very least, and we do go much further than that in many different places. I guess, as well as like societies, we always have every round of zones which we have at least one society or one person or one student group that's there that's proposing another step forward that we can take. And I think that's something that's really good, is also having those forums for anyone who wants to pitch in how the Students' Union can be more sustainable, being able to do that.
And you mentioned COP, and so people laugh sometimes about COP, but if you look at the sustainability pages and look at who actually went to COP from UCL and all the things they did, it was amazing. I was wowed by it, and it's definitely worth a look just to see how we contributed, because whatever you think about COP, if you're not contributing, if you're not getting your voice in there, well, it's happening without you, isn't it? And I think UCL's presence was amazing at that.
It was, and I think it was wowed. Great that we could send students there as well. We could send Mary, president of the SU, and that's fantastic. It's a great contribution.
We sent students.
Contribution to have. On the topic of students, the student life strategy is a very key sort of thing with both UCL and the SU. Something we haven't talked about yet. Kathy, could you perhaps just briefly explain what the student life strategy is for us?
Yeah, it's really your strategy, but my job and the job of my team is to help enable it. So we worked together on developing it and making sure that it was, had things in it you really could deliver. We wanted to make sure, that it had clear targets, and we set up a student life strategy as committee, in order to make sure that we were checking in at regular points with a good selection of people from across the UCL to check on progress and to see whether there's anything we can remove. So the student life strategy, which Ahmad will explain much better, but it has a number of pillars, but it's all about that whole aspect of student life, which is when you're not in the classroom, but all the other things you want to do. The work that's already done and the offering here is already amazing. But they're taking it to the next level by increasing participation, student participation in the range of activities. I mean, the arts offer is really interesting and is really growing. The number of students, the types of students, the access, it's just a really exciting strategy, and we love it. I love it. And I think there is a core piece, which is that we need more space for the Students' Union, and that is now going through as a priority project on the estates work. And I co-chair that committee too. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good example. If you do this thing together, sometimes I can help with the framing that will make sure it lands well in the community. The Students' Union can do things that the university never could. So if you get those two things together, it works really well. But you can talk more about the strands. Yes. They're great.
Yeah, what kind of things should we expect to see out of the student life strategy?
I could talk for ages about this. This is a topic that really gets me excited. I mean, essentially, boiling it down, student life strategy aims to double everything we do, and it's because we recognize that a UCL education is not complete without those core extracurricular and co-curricular components that really do enrich student life. So as part of the student life strategy, a big focus is on mental and physical health. And we know that this is really enabled by students feeling like they're part of a community by either finding their sports club or by joining their favorite arts community within UCL and feeling like they can create something with other students.
And you have a new lead for arts, don't you?
We do. We have a new head of arts. We've recruited a new head of arts, a head of intercultural engagement, and they help us basically enable all these things. So with the arts, we do arts really well. Across the board, we already do arts really well. And the next step is to make sure that anyone who does want to get involved with the arts, regardless of their previous experience, can. So we're opening up different pathways for students to get involved outside of the typical society structure, and then using the expertise and experience of our societies to enrich that, because we do have lots of experience and expertise within our student body. We have more weeks in the Bloomsbury Theatre, which is very exciting. We just had a new project with the Royal Opera House a few weeks ago. And yeah, that's very exciting, I think. And then aside from that, aside from the arts, which I know is a very exciting thing, and I wish I could talk about it for ages, it's also recognizing that UCL is very big and the experience varies, and being able to cater to all the different students. And I think the departmental hub or departmental societies that we want to establish through that, where students can have access to the SU, through their department, be able to get involved through their department, and have that hub that's very close to where they are, so that we're better able to be more equitable and more inclusive in what we do, tailor stuff to, for example, mature students, to part-time students, and that will be through the departmental model, I guess. So yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. And I'm conscious we've been talking for quite a long time, and I'm sure you're a bit tired of want a glass of water or something. But I guess we'll just tease the last question I'll put to you is this new building sort of what any more tea or gossip on this? What should we expect? Is there a timeline?
What I can say is that we have agreed to progress. We've put a lot of funding in, a couple of £100,000 into progressing to the next stage, to get the next REBA stage on the main options. So that has just been agreed last week. So it's moving. I mean, you know, there's a little way to go yet before we're breaking ground or whatever it is we do, but it's you know, it's looking positive. Just going to put it there.
What Kathy said, really. More student space, more performance space, more rehearsal space, more everything.
Yeah.
And we're very excited that
And
UCL
the
is really
student
working
study
with us.
space, you know, there'll be some teaching space in there that, you know, can be shared. The plans are grand.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Sounds like a great vision, and yeah, I look forward to seeing it come to life. Well, thank you both for your time, and hopefully we've answered most, if not all, of the questions put to us today. And yeah, thank you so much. Nice to sit down and chat.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you to all you students for tuning in. It was really wonderful to have the opportunity to put your questions to our experts at both UCL and the Students Union. This is sort of a termly format where we want to sort of open up conversations and really make things transparent and accountable. So we're really keen to hear your input, whether that's sort of questions for future discussion or your thoughts in a different format. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.